Emily Dickinson, A Silent Cry. The town of Amherst, Massachusetts, lay under a quilt of white snow. The houses glowed faintly with oil lamps, and the streets fell into a hushed silence that only winter could command. Yet in one house, the Dickinson residence, a single upstairs window remained lit long into the night. Inside, hunched over a small desk, Emily Dickinson pressed her pen to paper, her hand moving in quick, restless strokes as if her life depended on it. For Emily, it did. A child of shadows. Emily Elizabeth Dickinson had been born into a family of stature and discipline. Her father, Edward Dickinson, was a stern lawyer and politician, a man who demanded order in his household. Her mother, distant and often unwell, offered little warmth. Emily, caught between silence and expectation, sought refuge where others rarely looked within words. As a child she wandered through the garden, collecting images like treasures. A bee resting on a petal, the changing shadows on a gravestone, the first crimson of autumn leaves, these were her companions. She wrote them down in letters to friends, never realizing that she was already weaving poetry. At school she excelled, but she was restless. Teachers praised her brilliance, yet she resisted the rigid dogma of religion. When her classmates stood to declare their salvation, Emily stayed seated, her heart too untamed for ritual. She was not faithless, but she believed God spoke in sunsets and silence rather than sermons. The hidden heart. What no one saw, what she hid even from her closest circle, was how fiercely she loved. Historians would later debate the mysteries of her letters. Who was the master she wrote to? Was it the Reverend Charles Wadsworth, the married preacher whose friendship pierced her solitude? Was it Susan Gilbert, her childhood friend and eventual sister-in-law, to whom Emily sent nearly 300 passionate letters? The truth was less simple, more human. Emily's heart was a labyrinth of longing, and every path ended in a locked door. Society would never allow her love to bloom openly. She carried it quietly, like a candle hidden inside her chest, burning her but lighting her words. Retreat into silence. By her late 20s, Emily's retreat from the world had begun. At first, she avoided public gatherings. Then she stopped leaving the house altogether. Eventually, she confined herself mostly to her bedroom, wearing only white dresses, as though she were both bride and mourner of her own existence. To her family and neighbors, she became a legend in her own lifetime, the strange recluse who lowered gingerbread in a basket from her window for children, who refused visitors yet sent them poems instead. But to Emily, it was not madness. It was survival. The outside world was too loud, too cruel. Inside, she could hear the music of her mind without interruption. And what music it was! In that small upstairs room, Emily poured herself into nearly 1,800 poems. She stitched them into little booklets, tied with thread, hidden away in a drawer. They were full of life and death, bees and graves, hope and despair. They broke every rule of poetry at the time: dashes instead of proper punctuation, slant rhymes that bent language into new shapes, images so stark they startled the page. Yet she published only a handful while alive, each one edited ruthlessly by men who did not understand her vision. The rest she kept secret, perhaps fearing rejection, perhaps knowing the world was not ready. A sister's discovery. In May of 1886, Emily's light went out. She died quietly in the same house where she had been born, at the age of 55. The town whispered, but for her family it was a private storm. Her sister Lavinia, sorting through Emily's room, opened a drawer and found a bundle. Then another. And another. Piles of bound pages, each one alive with a voice that had been hidden all those years. Lavinia's hands trembled as she read. This was not the silent recluse the town knew. This was a woman of fire, of wit, of heartbreak and rebellion. Emily had not been mute. She had been shouting all along, only in a language of her own invention. Afterlife on the page. When Emily's poems were finally published, they came heavily edited, her dashes straightened into neat lines, her eccentricities ironed flat. Still, the world began to notice. Slowly at first, then with awe. Here was a poet who had reinvented poetry itself, a voice as sharp as frost and as tender as the first bud of spring. It would take decades before her work was restored to its true form. But by then, Emily Dickinson had become immortal. The twist of legacy. The irony of Emily's life was cruel but poetic. She had hidden from the world, fearing it would not understand her, yet the world came to need her more than she ever could have imagined. Her lines about death and eternity were read at funerals. Her words on love and hope were whispered between lovers. Students memorized her strange, halting rhythms, carrying them across generations. She who had lived unseen became one of the most visible poets in American history. A silent cry. If you stand today in Amherst and look up at that small bedroom window, you might still feel her presence. The woman in white, scribbling furiously in the dark, writing not for fame, not even for recognition, but because her soul demanded it. Emily Dickinson's story is not only about poetry. It is about the cost of being different in a world that demands sameness. It is about love that cannot be spoken, and genius that cannot be tamed. It is about a silent cry that echoes across centuries, reminding us that sometimes the loudest voices are the ones the world almost never hears. And so, the woman who barely left her room crossed the entire world.